What's up, everybody? My name is Nickerson. Thanks for coming back to my channel. Today we have my good friend J-Mak in the building. What's up, J-Mak?
What's up, my friend?
Not much, man. So today we're going to be talking about our favorite childhood games and what got us into gaming. So if you can remember, what would you say is the first game that got you into gaming, or either the first game you played or the first game that really got you into gaming?
I'd say the first game that I ever played actually was Super Mario Brothers. When I first got the Nintendo system, way back in the day, it was
So was it SNES or NES?
It was NES. It was NES, and that's playing that game. I just remember it because it was so, in a sense, it was psychological, to being a child growing up playing that, because it was so frustrating because you had only a limited amount of continues, or lives, they would call it. And
back in the day,
we didn't really have, memory cards or, cheat codes. Like back then, if you got a cheat code, you'd have to wait. You have to write it down at a certain time.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, or find a Nintendo Power magazine. Definitely Super Mario Bros. One of the hardest games, actually, probably I've ever played. And I still hold on to that because we had Wii, and we went back to play it again, and it was still
hardcore.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that game. So you're talking. So there's a couple people that think that there's a couple games that people think are the first one. You're talking about Super Mario Brothers 1. It's got the blue levels. It's not the one where Donkey Kong's at the top, right? Not the arcade one.
No.
The Super Mario Brothers 1 you're talking about. Okay, yeah. I'm just making sure.
Yeah, because there was two versions, I remember. So So there was Mario Brothers, which was not Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah, so and then right, Mario Brothers,
and that was the one with Donkey Kong, actually.
Yeah.
So it played definitely you had to get to the top, hit the power. You remember what
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a lot of emulators later that they actually had. That it was similar. Then they had Donkey Kong later that came out. You had all those kind of games that were. You'd have to get to the top by Q*bert. I don't know. That was another one.
I know. I remember what that is. I never got into that, but
yeah, that was. Those were kind of basic games. I think testing the strategy when you're a kid. But I'd have to say what accelerated my growth into gaming was Contra.
I remember that, the AABB, that famous code, up, down, left, right,
left, right. Yep, I remember that.
That was a classic. One of my buddies really likes that game. That was definitely genre-defining side scroller. It was different.
It was different because it was back then in 8-bit in all its glory. It was. You had two guys. One guy was blue, one guy was red, and they was almost one guy was Arnold, and the other guy was Rambo. It was a guy from.
Oh shit!
One guy was.
I didn't think of that.
It looked like one guy was definitely Arnold from Predator. The other guy was Rambo. So if you even look at the front cover, it actually looks you could see, the DNA in that, and if you could compare different
how it
movies.
looks.
Yeah. So I think that was in a sense it was a fantasy being a kid, because those were movies like Commando, Terminator, Rambo.
They don't make those ultra masculine movies anymore. You know what I mean?
They don't because I think in a sense being a kid, survival horror going back all the way back then, it was a kid's fantasy to be a G.I. Joe fighting monsters in the dark, and Contra, I think, is what introduced it.
Yeah, you could be right. That sounds about right to me.
Possibly. I'm not saying, because we don't know.
It definitely had a huge hand in it, for sure.
I think
because you're right, because even in Resident Evil, you're the special tactics. You're not really just a regular cop. You're the special tactics and rescue squad.
Right.
Going into survival horror. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I think in the sense that there were arcade games back then. So when you had Super NES, when that came out, there was arcades. If you went to an actual arcade, you could play games that were as powerful as the Super Nintendo before it got released. So when it got put on console, it would go to a Nintendo system. So if you played Double Dragon back in the day or something that, it looked like a Super Nintendo game, but you couldn't play that on regular Nintendo the way it played. But
right, it was a generation ahead.
Same thing with Sega, I think, in a sense, where the 32-bit games that were starting to come out, you'd see them, and you didn't know it was 32-bit, but then you started to realize that it was, I don't know, Outrun was kind of I don't know, that was kind of
the genre back then.
Yeah, there was definitely.
That was good.
I remember there was a movie called Encino Man, and there was
I know what that is. I haven't seen it though.
It's an old school movie.
Is it good?
Oh yeah, I think it's Brandon Fraser. It's kind of like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
1990s comical.
Okay.
Definitely, it's a comedy for sure, but it's definitely good. Pauly Shore's in it. But
Talk about the '90s, you know. Pauly Shore.
They're in the Ice Palace, and I remembered that there was a game called Radmobile, and it was by Sega. And I looked back, and it said that they had a 32-bit processor in the arcade.
Oh, okay.
So that's when.
And that was like a generation ahead of what was out.
So it was like a computer of its own.
I remember that back in the day. That's true. There was like you go to the arcades, and it was like the next generation before it. You know what? I used to be like pumped back in the day when I go to the arcade. See, my generation was like when I was in middle school. It was like the late '90s. So something I liked was when I was in the arcade. I remember that Microsoft had this thing called Project X. They didn't say anything about it. It was just Project X, and it was rumored that it was going to be this powerful PC or console. And then they announced that it was going to be the Xbox. Right. And I remember I had such high hopes. Every time I'd be in the arcade, Fun and Games in Framingham, Mass. I don't even know what that is now. It might still be the same thing. But
it was. And there was Fun World in New Hampshire, I remember.
Yeah, that's a good one too, in Nashua.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd go there and I'd play these games and I'd just be like so hopeful. I'm like, oh man, I hope these, like the Xbox can do anything, right? That's going to be the next big generation. Like that's going to be it. All these arcade games I'm playing, I hope they get on Xbox.
And then you find out realistically later that that the next generation systems, when you went back to play them, that consoles were actually end up becoming more powerful than the arcade, because usually it was always the arcade that would always release something that was like a light year behind it, you know what I mean? But then later on, when you went back to play, like, I think it was Midnight Winging that I played. It was pretty sick, actually. But you know, you could still get, you know, the racing game, Wang and Midnight.
Wang on Midnight.
Was it Wang on Midnight?
Yeah. It's just that game though. I got a couple friends who will probably see this and be very glad you mentioned that game. That game was hardcore, dude. That was an awesome arcade game.
Yeah.
I got into it towards the end, but I did love it. You had the little cards.
Yep.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was like the first arcade game that you had. That it was actually, you could put a memory card in, and actually it kept
your data.
Yeah,
right?
it kept your data of what your car was.
That's awesome.
Yeah. No,
you could like customize your car. That was awesome. There was the one Initial D too. Initial D was more towards the drifting. Wangan was better. But Initial D, they also had the card system.
It was definitely, it was definitely an arcade race. It wasn't like a simulator or something like.
No, it was fun.
Yeah,
simulators really, in my opinion,
get you in and get you out.
Yeah, they're not fun. Do you remember that Ferrari simulator back in the day, dude? Yeah, I don't know about you, but I made that shit like 100 feet. And I'd end up on the grass, and I was like, "This is stupid. I don't even know how to." I was like 13 or whatever.
Was it 12. No? Was it Super GT by Sega?
Was it? It was like a red Ferrari you got into. It was like the one I'm thinking of
that's Outrun. I think
was quite literally Outrun was arcade also. I know Outrun, but they ended up putting that on N64 too.
Outrun was the Ferrari I remember, because it had the guy, the blonde, like the California looking guy, and like the hot chick in the passenger seat. And you go through like
that's not the one I'm thinking of. The Ferrari, it was like a Ferrari. It was a red Ferrari. You could go in from either side, and it was 3 screens. There was a clutch, a manual shifter. It was a straight up, it was in Fun and Games. If that place is still there, we'll have to check it out.
No, it was a Miata.
Oh, Miata. Big difference.
It was a Mazda Miata, unless they had a Ferrari in there. But they probably could have changed the car. But I remember that they had it was basically a big screen.
Yeah.
And I remember the game they actually played, and it was Ridge Racer.
Oh yeah. That's a throwback.
I remember that. No, yeah. That was a unreal time. It's so funny, because Ridge Racer, actually, when I was a kid, we had before GameStop, before EB Games, there was a place called Funcoland.
Yep, that was the spot.
And I'll never forget it. I actually entered the Ridge Racer contest.
Nice.
Yeah.
That was good. That the old school gaming tournaments were awesome. Like there's no internet. Like you had to meet up with people. You had to know about it, be in the know. Funcoland was awesome. EB Games, of course.
And before that, it was Electronics Boutique, I think.
I think it was Electronics Boutique. I think they were two separate things, and then I think Electronics Boutique bought Funcoland, and then GameStop bought all the independent gaming companies.
That's exactly.
And then ran it into the fucking ground, because GameStop fucking sucks. So I had to get that out at least once in the video.
So I remember Ridge Racer was the first game. No, I think
racing
Battle
games
of Tashiden was the first
launch title for PS1. Dude, I actually have a video. I'll link it in the description because that came up. I gotta pound it because I think you're the only other person that would ever mention that game besides me, because that was a launch fighter on the PS1. And honestly, especially
it wasn't like Tekken, but I mean it was a good like a starter kit.
It was good, solid. It wasn't as like crazy combos as Tekken was, but like the fun and the competitive level, it was there.
It let you know that Sony was not screwing around, because Sega had Virtua Fighter, and it kind of like, because Virtua Fighter had more of like the polygons, everything was just very square. But if you
for what, Sega Genesis?
When Sega, it started with Sega Saturn, and that was the
Sega Saturn. Okay, I'm not too familiar with the Sega systems.
I was always a Sega guy.
Yeah.
I was always a Sega guy, but I turned into a Sony guy later when I realized that I remember I was reading through a magazine. I think it was Electronic Game Monthly, and there was Game Pro, and then there was the other one. So I used to get them, and there was all these games that they said that were coming out, and it showed Resident Evil actually, and
best game series ever, dude. Best game series ever. And don't get it twisted.
A lot of people didn't understand like how special it was. It was so advanced for its time, because it had what was it? So if you remember a game called Alone in the Dark, it had camera angles, so it almost played like a movie, but you were actually controlling a 360-degree like world. But like every time, like every room you'd go into, you'd have to control the directional pad differently.
Yeah.
So it was like you were like looking at somebody like on a TV screen, but you were controlling it, so it made you feel like you were in charge of that world.
Oh yeah, and that adds to the stress level when like they're called tank controls for a reason. Like it adds to the stress, it adds to the survival horror. That's why, in my opinion, Resident Evil went downhill when they went more towards action. They're still great. Like I really do. I still love Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6. Not a huge fan of 7, and 8 was not bad. It was good. Like if you're just going into a game and you're like, oh, I want to play a horror game, it's good. But if you're a hardcore Resident Evil guy, it's not the best. But the thing about tank controls is it makes it more stressful. It's not supposed to be easy. They're like, oh, it's so hard to use, blah, blah. It's like, dude, that's part of it. It's a puzzle game. It's not an action game. This is like you're in a limited space with limited controls, limited ammo. You have to beat that thing or else you're dead. Like, It's not supposed to be easy, guys. It's not.
And the whole idea was like, when you played it, you were introduced to like this room that brought you to this like moment of peace. Because all the suspense the save room. And it's like I always would say, it's like that room, depending on which game you played, I remember the first one, it was right when you got to Nemesis, it was like, after Resident Evil 2, it was so, the music were getting more intense for the save rooms.
Oh, yep.
And
it was like more Doom. It was like a Doom melody. Not Doom the video game, it just had this like doom and gloom kind of like, it had this like hopeless like vibe to it, like a dark, hopeless, like
relentless.
Yeah. It was just.
It was relentless in a sense, because in the first one, it knew that
it was eerie.
In this giant mansion that you knew it was like a moment of rest. It was so many different like hallways and doors. You'd be safe at a moment, but like when you started to go to 2 and 3, you were out in the streets. So like that, the music changed in a sense. Because
it expanded, like just like
It let you know once you were out of that room, especially in Nemesis, that it was you could be attacked at any time. And that was the whole thing. I thought that how they were smart about it when Capcom, they were beasts when it came to like creating like suspense. And I think that Resident Evil had nailed it. And still, number one's my favorite.
It's same here, dude. I think we'll always agree on that. Resident Evil is just the original Resident Evil games. There's no game to this day that I can go into and it gets me into that like mode. Like it's an energy. When you start playing and you do a couple saves, you're like, shit, I need to like I need to keep getting. It's like I need to get out of this place. Yeah. Like, and that's the immersion that you get when you play a good survival horror game, and that's why survival horror games are my favorite games. Those and competitive first person shooters, Quake and Halo style. But for single player, like in my opinion, nothing touches survival horror. Nothing is as intense as a survival horror. It's immersive. It triggers all your like emotions and fears, and it's like, especially with save rooms, like you can't save anywhere. If you just did a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of errands and puzzles, and you didn't save, and someone's trying to kill you, you're stressed because you're like, oh, I don't want to go do all that shit again. And when you die, you're dead, man. Like you're saving, you're respawning at the save state. It's not like the new ones where it's auto save every 15 seconds.
Well, everything today is almost like, in a sense, it's almost like
Nerfed.
It's ultra secure. You know, it's almost. It's idiot proof, if you want to call it.
Yeah, it is.
It's a tutorial, and everything shows you how to like, you know, how to like, trains you before you do like a mission today.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. It
gives you like a
sense.
It holds your hand for like a good few levels, maybe half the game, depending on the game.
Yeah, it definitely does. But back then, when you didn't have that,
you didn't even know. Like when you open up Resident Evil, he's like, here, take this, and he gives you, you know, the lockpick and the weapon. You don't even know. Like it doesn't tell you anything. You just have to figure out what's going on and how to use everything.
I got a good Easter egg. Well, it's actually not an Easter egg. It's kind of like it's interesting because if we had to read to get, you know, the survival books when you had to go, you know, if you wanted how to beat Resident Evil properly,
like strategy guides.
You had strategy guides, and
I got something for you. Let's. I was looking for mine. The other day, right? I was looking for mine the other day. I'm glad you brought this up. And I couldn't find it, so I went on eBay and I grabbed one. I got the Director's Cut strategy guide. I honestly just collect these. I never actually use them. I used to just bring them to school and like look through them, and look, it actually still has the original poster of the timeline of everything. So this thing's in mint condition. And then while I was searching, hey, you can check that out. While I was searching, I found this. This is a Brady Games. Look how evil this, evil, because it says evil on it. Look how early this is. This was the original Resident Evil logo they were going to go with before they went with the zombie face. So this is like this might be one of the earliest strategy guides ever made, honestly. It might be.
It's almost like the
Brady Games. It's totally unauthorized guide.
It's almost like the you know, when you died, it said you died. It's almost like that. You know, type of font. Font, you know what I mean?
You're right. And it's cool because...
Just a theory, because I don't know for sure, but...
No, yeah, you're right you're probably right about that. It looks just like it. But that's what... I remember hearing that back in the day, that this was actually supposed to be the cover. And that's why this is the unauthorized guide. They ripped off this probably before the game was out. And it says, look, see, it says totally unauthorized guide to Resident Evil. So that's why, because they didn't end up going with this graphic. They went with that one.
Right.
So that's cool, right? That I got a strategy guide and it's the original graphic. So this was made before the game came out. So this is rare.
I think I have
a lot of rare Resident Evil stuff.
I think I actually have one from 1990. But not to regress, but actually kind of in that direction. So
we're talking about gaming. We're always regressing.
We can just take a time travel machine and keep going back. Mm-hmm. But there's one thing that I didn't realize up until later, that you really didn't actually need the strategy guides like 60 or 70% of the times, because if you actually read that, a lot of those when you were in the scientist labs, scientists would leave behind these memos, and those were actually right around the area where you were supposed to like achieve on. It would actually give you the exact information how you had to pursue on for, you know, in that part of the game, wherever you were, if you were 50-60% into like they didn't really did they call them as campaigns back then, or?
Yeah, I mean, it would just be a campaign. It's just the game, because
I feel like the word campaign didn't even come out until like way later.
That's true. People weren't using it back then for that, so that's a good call. Campaign is typically used for a game that has multiplayer.
Yep.
So you could say, oh, like it's the campaign, but aside from that, yeah, I mean, it is the campaign. The campaign is the single player.
Yeah, it would be like it would say career, not career. They would say which story would you take?
Yeah, story mode.
Yeah. No, it was always in the science labs that they would always give the memos, and they would show. Like for instance, I remember when in Resident Evil 4 you were fighting one of those regenerators, and
oh my god, yeah.
And you didn't realize that when it showed it had several different like types of
like a weak area.
Like a weak area that you'd have to shoot at it, and it gave you the hint that the thermal imaging scope was actually inside there.
Yeah.
And you'd shoot it, and 4 is they all give different feelings, I feel.
They do. I think no matter what, I like to say it like this too because it's cool, but Resident Evil, the best Resident Evils are 1 through 0. Which is funny because it's
0 I always put last for some reason. Not saying it's a bad game.
No, it's last of the good ones. It's last of the good ones for sure. It's still one of the hardcore ones. It's still better than the newer ones, but it's definitely like the least the least best of the best ones.
I think a lot of people got discouraged because when they were on the train,
It was hard.
Yeah, it was, because when you gave it up, people always gave it up because they were on the train. But if you actually played through it, you actually get to go through a good portion of a mansion.
Yeah.
Because
so wait, I got to pause you right there.
Yeah.
I'm leaving it. I know it's crazy. I'm leaving it. I've never beat 0. I've only got about halfway through. That's the only race. It's like, it's one of those things like I have one left still. You know what I mean? Like I got into Resident Evil after there were, so I got into it, like my uncle showed it to me when it first came out in 96. He's like, Matthew, don't tell your mother, but this is the new game Resident Evil. And I remember I was like, oh my God, this is so scary. This is so awesome. I need to play it. But I didn't actually get it and play it until I was older. So I remember I got a job at Jiffy Lube. My first check, I went into GameStop or EB Games and I bought Resident Evil Director's Cut, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil Code Veronica. So, and then I had them for a while, and I worked through them slowly.
What was your process? Which way did you go? Like
how did you play them? So I did them mostly in order. I did one Director's Cut. Director's Cut's my preferable because you get the arrange mode and the better save room music. The Director's save room music, in my opinion, is the best save room music in the whole series, but that's just my opinion. So I went 1, 2. I think, I can't remember. I think I did 1, 2. I'm pretty sure I did 1, 2, 3. And I actually played the remake. And then I did Code Veronica way later because I played Code Veronica. I got to Antarctica and my PS2 disc stopped working.
Everybody got to Antarctica. Right when that happened.
My disc stopped working. So it wasn't like I didn't quit that and I didn't purposefully stop it. But I ended up, you know when I ended up beating Code Veronica? I have to admit it. Once they remade it for the 360. They poured and polished it. I'm pretty sure that's when I actually finished it. Or either that or I got another PS2 disc. It's been so long.
I think my disc got really scratched is what happened. And I think like I was like, oh my God, it's never gonna work ever again. So I cleaned it like so good like one day and I got there.
You did get it working?
Yeah, I got it working and that was it. And I think you switched to Chris Redfield.
Yeah, you do. Yep.
That's what I remember. I went.
You see him climbing up the thing. Yeah. I remember that. Climbing up the cliff.
It's so. I think that in a sense that Code Veronica was so. It was something that it went back to the roots. I felt of 1.
Yeah.
But in a different way.
You know what I like is like the
combined all together.
So if there are people watching this who haven't played Code Veronica and will play it, I won't spoil too much, but there's the twisted, demented past of Alexia Ashford and, you know, the twin brother and what happens. And like, that is so Resident Evil to me. It's when I went through that story, like some people like don't like Code Veronica. I think the majority of people do. I'm in like all the Resident Evil groups. The majority of people who played it do like it. But a lot of people thought it was like weird. It is weird, but Resident Evil, the stories of these like bioorganic weapons and these like twisted family like heirlooms in the mansion, the way the mansions connect to the labs and the money is like Code Veronica X next to the first one is my favorite one. I can't say I like it better than the first one. I'm just like one of those people 99% of the time with movies or video games, I always usually think the first one's better, except for like Terminator 2 or Twisted Metal 2.
Right.
But
certain sequels are always, they have the edge.
But Code Veronica X is like it's right there with the first one. That game kicks ass.
For some reason, I think the PC, what was it, the PSX version, it
of which one?
Resident Evil 1.
Yeah.
I liked the remake.
I did too.
For some reason, I just felt the
first one's better. Yeah.
No, yeah, the PlayStation one, and then they had the GameCube remake of 1. I think that it looked like the mansion looked bigger for some reason in Resident Evil 1. Because it didn't have as much detail, so they were able to...
I think you're right. It did look bigger, which is funny because actually the remake one actually is bigger and it has different rooms and stuff. That I will say, I'll give the Resident Evil remake, the first remake, that is one of the very few games in existence that they remade and like added stuff to it and they lost no value. The Resident Evil remake for GameCube, even though we both like the PS1 version better, it's still a perfect game. That's a perfect 10. The remake is still a perfect 10, just like the original Resident Evil is.
And they remade it like several times too, I think.
They remade it on GameCube, and it's not a port and polish. They remade it, and then they ended up like high def port, which is like they blow the dust off the graphics, make it look a little newer. But it was an actual remake for GameCube. They changed the game. And then once GameCube came out, now next gen, then if you download it, it's the high def port and polish. So it's nice. They cleaned it up a little bit from GameCube graphics, but it's still the same game.
I think what happened.
So it's a remaster, is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think what happened was in the first one, I went talking to somebody. So the characters were polygons.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, the layout of like the mansion was a drawing, and that's all it was. There was only a few different things that were polygons, like the furniture and stuff like that you could move.
Yeah.
But like the layout was all just a big painting. So I think in a sense what happened was as you could walk, like for instance, when you push the clock, and remember like in the beginning.
I remember.
That would stick out. It was a real polygon. It was in, so if you look
you don't push the clock. It's when you finish the puzzle, the clock moves to the side.
Oh, wow. Dude,
this is my game.
Dude, this is your game, man. Dude, it's been so long.
But I know there's also on the opposite side of that, you push the drawer where the dog comes out, and then you push that little bureau thing, and then there's ammo underneath it. There's two pushable bureaus. You can usually tell because sometimes they're a little bit off color because they can move and they're not.
But that's what I was saying. That you could tell because it looks like the mansion, everything that's there is a painting, but the objects that you can move, they would stick out, and they would almost look like beyond 2D, or they would look almost similar to 3D.
Yeah, the color would be off because they can move.
Because they can move, exactly. Yeah. No, modern gaming is definitely. I still consider Resident Evil 1 modern gaming because it just was something that went to
in the grand scheme of things, right? Like I know where you draw the line is like the two, the side scroll versus 3D.
Yeah,
that's where I do because that's like our generation. We saw it change. Now the changes kids see between 360 and Xbox One are like just better graphics. Like it's not a huge better sound, but they don't. Most people don't recognize that.
No, they don't. I think in the sense that people would naturally, everything today I think is a lot of third person. Shooters or first person.
A lot of first person.
But like to go to the next level, how Resident Evil jumped from PlayStation, we were like looking at like games like like Sega Genesis, Sega CD. You had 3DO, and then you had the Jaguar. Like nothing was really true, like 32-bit. And once it went to that level, when you saw Resident Evil, I think that was the breakthrough in gaming where things were like, oh shit, it looks like it's coming out of the screen finally.
Yeah, it looks 3D. It looks so real, right? Back in the day, you're like, oh my god, it's so real.
Yeah, I mean, till this day, I think that if I look at a game now, it's like I wanted to play like Sega CD, like a motion picture, where there's no CGI at all, but still, picture being my dream was, and it's so weird, even as a kid. Watching a Sega CD game because they were just like videos that they made, and like you could like use a crosshair and just it would be like a camera shot of a shot played over and over again, but it's still the same shot. Like imagine being able to control a character and environment that looks like a motion picture.
That's still next level because
I go. Everybody feels like it's gonna hate me after saying that. Like, if I look at a game, I go, nah, it still kind of looks fake. I want it to feel like a motion picture.
Yeah.
And I even talked to a couple of people that were in gaming, and they said, and they were in, what was it, graphic animation, all that. Even back then, they were like, it's still, they're still working on it, but to even get to that level, it would still take like another 20 years.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I mean, I think the thing that is limiting a lot of like creativity is just profits. It's because I did a video on this too. I'll link that too. It's these companies that get into gaming because their goal is money only. Like back in PS1 and SNES days, like game developers loved gaming. They wanted to make a game. Now you get a bunch of companies that want to make a game to make money, and that's going to take away from the game because they're just going to end up copying what's popular. Like, some CEO goes, you know what? Let's make a video game. What sells? Okay, Call of Duty, Halo, Apex Legends, those are big hitters. Let's make a game like that. And like when you go into it with like I want to like squeeze money out of an industry and I'll give you some product, it's never going to be as good as like, some kid developing a video game in his basement for like years, Like it's not going to compare.
I think I keep using I think in a sense. Well, there's a lot of senses naturally because when you have a feeling about something, you just know it is. Because in gaming today, there's a lot of technology. I think that's at its peak. But I think in the generation where you just had those games that were just like like Contra in the beginning. They're built up. They're just crazy action games. Like there's a lot of like games today. A lot of fantasy, a lot of role playing. And that's cool and all. I mean, it's a different generation. But I think that the technology that we have today, but I think that a lot of like, you know, people from the past in gaming, you know, like it's a different generation. Like they're retiring, I feel, and it's
a different world, dude. We're getting up there in age now, where we see like a drastic change in the gaming industry and movies.
It's not saying that like the new generation, like they need to evolve and understand. It's like you can't just go back and ask them questions. How did you do it? Like when you grow up, you watch a movie or you read a book. Like when you're in school, like we had books, we would read a book. Our imagination came alive. Like guys that like went to like, you know, tech schools and went for like graphic animation and design. Like when they created an idea, like it came to them, and like they might have not had the technology that we had, but when they did it, it was solid. But like today, a lot of stuff is handed, I feel, in terms of technology, and they don't really, when you get a chance to, like, I feel that a lot of people today in this world should shut off, stay away from technology for like a day and just read and develop a concept, and then go back to the technology, and you will use it and you will utilize it, and it will just create this amazing masterpiece rather than putting something out like kind of like on a chain to make money. If you want to create a solid idea, you know, use your imagination from base.
I agree. Yeah, that's you know, there's still, I feel like there's a lot of indie games now, and a big part of that is because like the technology is easily acquired now. Like you can download Unreal Engine for free and start messing with it and make your own games. So like a lot of the best games out are like indie games or like small developers. It's because it's the people who want to make a game. They don't have big budgets to make some $50 million game.
They could spend a couple of years on it, and you know.
Yeah, and then, but they have a good idea. They have solid idea for gameplay. You know, they get the creativity. They usually have an idea.
They cater to the fans, of course.
Yeah, and they usually have like a unique art style to put on top of that. So, I mean, can't go wrong with most indie games. A lot of them have their own vibe. Even if they're not the best game, they usually give you a unique experience. Like I said this in one of my other videos too, is one of the things that I say is like if me and you like walked into like EB Games in the year 2000 and we just reached out and we grabbed a random game off the shelf versus 2021 grabbing a random game off the shelf, which game do you think is going to be better out of a random choice? 2000.
That's just like a general, like that's just not that by nature you already know.
Yeah, it's going to be the 2000 because it were not as many people. The gaming industry was not as saturated as it is now. Now everybody's making a game, like, you know.
I think that a lot of games that like people like I think that they want to create like a new idea or concept, but a lot of it keeps coming out with the same thing. I say like go back and, you know, go back to like a Nintendo game, for instance, and say you got an 8-bit, you have a low technology, but a great idea.
Exactly. You know? How do you make it work?
Yeah, and read a book or something like and create this like multiple concept with it, and all of a sudden you got, you know, the most amazing technology at hand, and you will just create like something so insane rather than creating a duplicate of like, you know, another thing. Like look at the game. There was a game I think it was called Black for PS2, and
I played that game.
Game was absolutely incredibly advanced for its time. It was
absolutely.
Like, it was, and the thing is, it didn't get enough credit, I don't think, because Modern Warfare was coming like right around the corner, and I think
was that the same?
360 might have been right around the corner.
Black was PS2 back in the day.
Yeah, you're right. Black was PS2.
I think that what would have been competing with that might have been SOCOM. But it was
SOCOM.
Because I know, I think Black did come out when Xbox was out. I think, you know, I think that came out after because the PS2 came out before the Xbox, as it usually does.
Yeah, it went like Dreamcast, PS2, and I think Xbox and GameCube came out. Like
that was the order. Yeah.
Yeah. So Xbox 360 was like the next generation. So I think that. Yeah. So actually, that was way.
Yeah. It was way after.
Ahead.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I played Black, and I was like, this game is unbelievable.
For PS2, I mean, it was a great shooter for PS2.
Oh my god, it was.
Didn't feel. I went back. I'll be honest, I didn't play it till recently. I had a.
So did I. I played it like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I played it like 6 months ago. I got you beat.
It was. I remembered it. It was like you could tell like they were just starting to experiment with aiming down the sights.
Yeah.
But I remember like there was a few other games like it didn't.
Time Splitters.
Yeah, you couldn't aim. Yeah. time splitters?
I don't know if you could. I honestly I don't remember, but I remember it like black. It reminded me there was some sort of like movement or something that reminded me of time splitters about that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I also haven't played time splitters in like a million years. They need to make a new time splitters, dude. That game was awesome. I'll be honest. I barely remember
game I
it.
played for PS2 actually.
Time splitters?
Yeah.
Shit. I played the hell out of time splitters too.
One I played. The first.
I played a little bit of that. I definitely wouldn't be able to remember anything about that. I barely remember two, but I remember it's one of those titles like I don't remember it that well, but I remember how much I liked it when I was into it. You know what I mean? Like I know if I picked it up and played it, I'd be like, oh man, like all the memories would just like surge back in my head of the back in the day.
And they were smart about it too, because like when you actually shot, like when you shot somebody, there was no gore in it.
Yeah, it was like a softer kind of.
Yeah, so it was catered to like, you know, when you shot.
It's like what Super Nintendo did with Mortal Kombat.
Exactly, and it was so like in a sense like GoldenEye, but like it was just so like powerful. Like when you shot, it just I don't know. I couldn't explain it.
It gave you from what I remember, it gave you a little like white like indicator that you hit him. It was like it was like a punch, like a hit notification.
Because it probably had the pack on it. I think the PS2 maybe.
What?
Remember that when it vibrated for the first time, the PS2 controller, the PS controllers, because nothing else did.
The Rumble, yeah.
They had like a Rumble pack.
Did they invent the Rumble?
No, maybe N64 did.
It was separate though. It was the first console to have a Rumble pack built in.
Actually, I think had it.
Besides, the Dreamcast had Rumble also. I honestly don't remember if Dreamcast came out before PS2 or not. I can't remember that.
Yeah, I don't know.
If it did, that would be embarrassing for PS2 because the Dreamcast looks a lot better than PS2. So that's what makes me think the Dreamcast came out after.
No, no. The Dreamcast came out before, and I remembered that the software was already ahead of its time.
Oh yeah,
because they knew. But they.
You know what I hated about the Dreamcast? I'm a big controller guy, but I didn't like that controller, the Dreamcast. It really felt like shit to me.
People said it was meant for gaming.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought
maybe it was. I mean, I think it was meant for gaming.
That was the only time that you could put like something like in the what was it? So your memory card, like so if you.
It was like an evolved N64 controller.
It was.
Now that I like the N64 controller as much as like a normal person, I would say, which is like I like it, but like let's be honest, it was not the greatest controller. Super Nintendo controller was great for its time, but the N64 was just, why would you make it like that?
I know, it was.
What were you
like,
thinking?
It was, yeah, no.
You know?
I remember it. So, yeah, you're right.
But it wasn't the worst. It just felt like, you know, like the Xbox 360 kind of like the Xbox One,
it was like the Dreamcast.
So confusing. The original Xbox had it was like the Dreamcast controller, but they flared out. The Dreamcast controller would flare like this, and I just felt like it was like straight up. But the Xbox, it went like this, and it was like, oh, it was a more natural kind of like your hands are angled like this versus like holding it like this.
Like when you had the trigger behind.
Like, you know, remember how
holding the handle of a gun or something like that, like.
So sort of, yeah, like a turret kind of thing.
Yeah, like something.
But it was just like uncomfortable. It wasn't the worst controller by any means. It was just something I remember holding it. I was like, I just don't love this controller. It felt like the buttons felt good and the triggers felt good, but just the shape of the controller I didn't like. That's just my preference. I'm not hating.
No,
there's a lot worse controllers.
I think the Dreamcast, in a sense, like it had its strength. In terms of like, what was it? It had internet. That was the first, I think, system that had internet. I think, right? It was a Dreamcast.
It would have to be.
But PS2 had the DVD player.
PS2 did have online, but not until later in the system's life.
Later.
So
right.
Dreamcast, I don't remember if Dreamcast came out first or not. Either way, I know that had internet capability before.
You had to plug
PS2's
it in. I think it came to the phone.
Mainstream. I remember my Uncle Kenny. Shout out Kenny if you're watching this. He called me up one day and he told me the deets. Dude, this guy had the inside info before anybody. It wasn't in magazines. He was out in California. He was talking to game developers, everything. And he called me. He goes, Matthew, I got the deets. You got to hear about this Sega Dream system that's coming out. It wasn't even a name yet, but he knew it was Dream something. He's like, the Dream system that's coming out. He's like, you're going to be able to plug in the internet to this system and play with people all around the world. And I was like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me, dude? Like, that was like, what? You can do that? Like, on a console? Like,
a lot of people, I think, that thought it was going to happen with even going back to like, what was it? No, not the Saturn. What was around that time? There was the PlayStation. No, maybe
I don't know those off-gen systems like that. Like
Saturn was
like Sega. I don't know the Sega systems well. I know the Genesis and the Saturn.
Saturn
and the CD.
failed, I guess, like really bad because I guess it did really well like in Japan, and then when it got here, it was like too expensive or something. And then Sony came. That's right. What happened was it was like $400, but when Sony came out with the PlayStation, which right on Christmas, was only $200. So
no, it was $300. It had to be.
No, it was on sale, man. It was like $200.
$200 for the PS1?
Yeah, I think my mother got it for me when I was.
I remember the
grade.
consoles always being $300. Really?
Yeah.
When it first launched?
When it first launched, I think it was on sale for like $200 or something.
Interesting.
Like
I'll have to look that up because I thought I could. I remember forever every console that I got was $300 when it came out, and then when Xbox came out, I heard it was going to be $500, but it ended up being $300 also.
Yeah, no. What happened was I think you could get 2 controllers, and then one game like that. So Toshiden, I think, came with it.
That was a launch
control.
Title.
That was a $200. So, but if you got, I think it was like the second one, either Tekken or Ridge Racer came with it.
I think it was Ridge Racer. It wasn't Tekken. That's a different game. Yeah, it might have been Ridge Racer. I know. There was a game I liked. Did you ever play this game? Weird game alert. That's awesome. Is a game called Jumping Flash.
No.
I got this game. I remember this kid, Kevin Sheehan. He got it for me for my birthday. I was like, shit, you got me a PlayStation game? That's like $50. That was before they went up to $60. It was $50 games. They were the jewel cases, or the big cases. Actually,
big cases with the originals.
Yeah. I have the Resident Evil one. I'll have to whip that thing out.
That's a big case, man. No,
that is.
No, it's crazy because back then, like those, when you first saw those cases, you were like, like wow, like what? It's like a story opening up. You know what I mean?
I have a bunch. Yeah.
So actually, I think Sega CD actually might have had the big cases too.
I don't remember that, but yeah, Jumping Flash was this game. It was about you were this robot rabbit. And you were on this 3D plane, and you had to collect these digital carrots, and then there'd be these weird like frogs that would jump around. This guy must have been tripping on something else because this is one of the weirdest games I've ever played. You're a robot, and when you jump up, you look down. It's like you jump up and then you aim down. It's the weirdest thing, but it's so cool, and it reminds me of like the creativity that like this grand idea. Imagine if you're a game developer making side scrollers forever, and then all of a sudden you find out this system's coming out where it's going to do 3D. Their imaginations must have been like, I got to do this. I want to do this. And this is one of those games where they just like let the creativity flow. This game is honestly like, we'll play it later. This game is super fun. Jumping Flash is a game I feel like almost nobody I know has played it, but that was a launch title on the PlayStation as well.
There's another game called Flash something. It kind of played like out of this world kind of.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Sega game kind of like it, then it came out. Definitely, it'll come to me later. But no, go ahead. Flash.
No, that's it. I think about the launch when we were talking about launch titles. So I remember that was one of the launch titles I got, and I was like, dude, this game is so weird, but it's awesome. Oh, you know what was another? Hold on. I don't know if it was a launch title. I'm gonna guess that it was. That's my guess. Okay, we can look it up later. Jet Moto. Did you play that one?
That was like the original.
Was it you I was talking to the other day about Jet
Wave
Moto?
Race, the original Wave Race.
It was better than Wave Race.
Yeah, it came out around the same time, I think. Too.
Who was I playing? My friend Timmy. Shout out Timmy. I think you met him. No, that was you might met him at one of the cookouts. But shout out Timmy. We were talking about how awesome Jet Moto is. That's like, talk about the prime time of gaming in the 90s and early 2000s. Like, dude, these companies, they came up with a game that was you race hover bikes. Like, can you imagine? Like, that's not going to come out again, dude. There's not going to be a company that's like, let's make a hover bike racing game because it's not going to sell like this millions amount. You know,
I think I had it on demo, and it was right around Tomb Raider when that came out.
Probably Tomb Raider was an early launch too.
Yeah, so
these are most of the games we were talking about are maybe not launch titles, but first year release for sure. Resident Evil came out the next year because PS1 came out in '95 and then Resident Evil came out in '96.
No, Tomb Raider was out
probably
after
95.
Resident Evil. No,
I honestly don't know. I wasn't a huge Tomb Raider fan. I like it, but I'm not hardcore enough to know when that came out. I don't.
Yeah,
really
maybe
remember.
You're right. Actually, hey, can we take a quick break, real quick?
You know, we'll just end it right here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we'll end it. We got a good, nice long session. I think. What are we looking at? We got like almost an hour, so that was good. So Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to J-Mak for coming out. We'll have him back very soon. What do you guys think? What's your favorite old school games, and what do you think of the new gaming industry? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.